Her stepfather sold her as useless, but the mountain man chose her to be mother of his twins. That is the heart of this story, and before we finish, you will know why a man who had already lost everything looked at one unwanted girl and saw the start of a new life. Hello, my dear friend. This is your narrator of Tales from the Wild West. If you enjoy these Western stories, you can like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Now let us ride back to the American West in the 1880s to a town called Dry Creek Junction, where a young woman named Hannah Reed was about to be sold in the middle of the street. Hannah stood in the dust with her hands at her sides, while men leaned on porch rails to watch. She was 22, broad-shouldered from years of work, and taller than most women in town. Her plain brown dress hung loose from too many washings, and her hands were rough and nicked, but her hazel eyes were steady. Beside her stood her mother's second husband, Abel Morton, a narrow man with whiskey on his breath. He faced a stranger who had come in that morning with a light wagon and a long ledger. Mr. Pike bought up bad debts and collected them hard, and today he was looking at Hannah the way a trader looks at a mule. You see, Mr. Pike Abel said she eats like a ranch hand and argues like a lawyer, and no decent man around here will take her. Strong as an ox, though. Put her in your kitchen, and she will work from sunup to sundown. She is worth every cent of what I owe you. Hannah's stomach twisted, but she did not move. Abel had lost money at cards again, and there was no mule left to sell, no extra saddle, no hidden coins. There was only her. From the doorway of the general store, her mother watched with a pale face and tight mouth, saying nothing at all. The men drifted closer when Mr. Pike reached for Hannah's arm, his fingers bony and damp. "Get in the wagon, girl," he said. "You will earn back every dollar your family wasted." Laughter rolled from the saloon porch. Someone called that it was about time that big girl was put to proper use. Hannah lifted her chin. She had been called too tall, too strong, too plain ever since she had shot up past the other girls. She had been told no man wanted a woman whose hands looked like a ranch hand's instead of a lady's, but she had never heard useless until today, and that word bit deep. For one wild moment she thought of wrenching free and running, but where would she go? Then from the shade of a freight wagon another man stepped out. He moved slow and steady like a big animal that feared nothing. He was tall enough that his hat brushed the awning, and his shoulders were thick as stacked timber. A worn buckskin coat hung from him, and a long rifle rested easy in the crook of his arm. Dry Creek fell quiet when they saw him. Folks knew Eli Calder, the trapper from the high country, who came down only when supplies ran low. They knew he lived 2 days' ride up in the pines, and that he had buried a wife and child up there. Since then he spoke little, and kept to himself. Yet now Eli walked straight between Hannah and Mr. Pike. He leaned his rifle against a post with care. When he spoke, his voice was low and even, and it carried to every porch on that street. "That girl is not going anywhere with you, unless she chooses it," he said, and every head in Dry Creek lifted at once. Mr. Pike bristled at that calm voice. "This is none of your concern, Calder," he said. "Man's settling his debt. I paid good money for what he has to sell," and he pointed at Hannah like she was a side of beef on a hook. Eli did not look at him first. He looked at Hannah. Up close he saw the sunburn on her nose and the way she held her jaw like a person who had learned not to cry where anyone could see. His dark eyes were steady as if he were weighing something important. Then he turned slow toward Mr. Pike. "You buy broken things," Eli said. "Mules about to founder, tools about to snap. That is your trade." His voice stayed quiet, but it seemed to fill the street. A woman is not broken because her family is mean or foolish. A woman is not a debt. Abel Morton shoved his hands on his hips. She eats my food and gives me back nothing but back talk, he snapped. She scares off decent men. There is no softness in her. She is as useless as a fence post in a river. Eli took a step nearer. I have seen fence posts stop floods, he answered. He bent and picked up the leather pouch at Mr. Pike's belt. The coins inside clinked heavy. I will cover his loss. Every cent. You can take my furs instead. Beaver, elk, winter trapped. You will come out ahead and you know it. Mr. Pike licked his lips and looked at the bundle tied to Eli's pack mule. The hides were good. The crowd watched his greed wrestle with his pride. At last he snatched the pouch back and jerked his chin. You are a fool, Calder, but a fool with fine pelts. We trade. Abel grabbed Hannah's arm as if to shove her forward. You heard him, girl. You belong to the mountain man now. Maybe he can beat some use into you. Eli's hand closed around Abel's wrist. He did not squeeze hard, yet Abel went white. She does not belong to me or to you, Eli said. Then to Hannah in that same even tone. You can walk away right now if you wish. Stay in Dry Creek. Hire on in some kitchen. I will still hand over the furs. The silence that followed felt like the whole town was holding its breath. No one had ever given Hannah a choice. Not about work, not about where to live, not about men who tried to corner her in the barn. She looked at Abel, at her mother, who still would not meet her eyes, at the men along the rail who had laughed when Pike reached for her. Then she looked at Eli Calder. His face was rough and weathered, but there was no hunger in his gaze, no mockery, only a kind of tired patience. If I go with you, she asked, will you put a rope on me like a mule? Will you call me useless when I fail? No, he said. You will work hard if you choose to stay. You will carry your share, and I will carry mine. You will have your own plate and your own say. And if after a time you decide you want a different life, I will see you safe to town and put money in your hand. Her heart thudded so loud she could barely hear the wind through the awnings. Behind that offer she could feel something solid as rock. A man who meant what he said. All right, Hannah answered. I will go. Not because he sold me, and not because you bought me. I go because I am done letting other people decide my life. A murmur ran through the onlookers. Abel swore under his breath. Her mother turned away with a shiver, like someone who had just lost a purse, not a daughter. Eli picked up his rifle and nodded once to Hannah. Get your bundle if you have one, he said. We ride before the sun gets high. The trail is long, and the mountains do not wait on anyone. Hannah owned one shawl and 2 dresses. They fit in a flour sack. She slung it over her shoulder and climbed onto the spare horse Eli led forward, a big, steady bay with kind eyes. She did not look back when they left Dry Creek. The town doors closed behind them one by one, as if the place were folding itself shut. By noon, the buildings were only a smudge behind them, and pine trees rose ahead like green walls. Hannah's legs ached from the saddle and dust coated her tongue, but with every mile the weight on her chest loosened a little. Eli rode ahead, his broad back straight, his hat brim cutting a clean line against the sky, and for the first time in her life, Hannah Reed wondered if the word useless might finally be left behind in the dust. By late afternoon, the trail had climbed high enough that the air turned thin and sharp, and the world behind them looked like a painted map instead of a place she had ever lived. Hannah's legs shook from gripping the saddle, and her fingers were stiff around the reins, but pride kept her quiet. Eli glanced back from time to time, his dark eyes taking her measure without a word. When the sun slid low, they rode out of the pines into a small clearing cupped in the arms of the ridge. A creek ran bright along one side, and in the middle of the open ground stood a square of log walls only shoulder high, with a canvas stretched over part of it like a poor man's roof. A lean-to of poles and tarred canvas leaned against a big spruce tree, and a stone fire ring sat between them, black with old ash. "This is it," Eli said at last. "Not much yet, but it will be." Hannah swung her leg over the bay and nearly fell when her feet hit the ground. Eli's hand was there before she could catch herself, steady and warm around her elbow. "Easy," he murmured. "First day is always the hardest." She pulled away more from habit than from anger. "Where do you want me?" she asked. "If this is to be my life, I might as well start." He studied her for a heartbeat. "You hungry first?" "Always," she said before she could stop herself, and that pulled one quick ghost of a smile from him. "Good," he answered. "Hungry people work better after they eat." He moved around the clearing with the ease of a man who had done the same motions 100 times. Firewood stacked, coffee on, bacon in a pan that hissed and popped. Hannah fetched water from the creek and tried not to stare at the way his shoulders filled his shirt or the quiet efficiency in his hands. He gave her the first plate and did not begin on his own until she had eaten half. No one had ever done that for her. When the sky went purple and the stars came out sharp and cold, Eli stood and picked up his bedroll. "You take the lean-to tonight," he said. "Canvas leaks on the north side, but it will keep the wind off. I will sleep under the wagon." She stared at him. "You are not coming in beside me?" "No. You have had enough of men crowding you. You need to know you are safe before anything else." Hannah lay awake a long time, listening to night sounds she did not know. An owl calling, the creek talking to itself, a horse shifting and snorting. Under it all, she could hear Eli's low, even breathing from the other side of the fire. She realized with a kind of slow wonder that she was not waiting for a door to slam or boots to cross the floor toward her. Her body ached, yet some locked place inside her had gone loose for the first time. Morning came with frost on the grass, and her breath white in the air. Eli handed her a tin cup of coffee and nodded toward the log walls. "Cabin will not build itself," he said. "Can you swing an axe?" She thought of years spent hauling water and splitting kindling while Abel called her useless. "Put one in my hands and see," she answered. The axe was heavy but familiar. Eli showed her once how to set her feet and how to let the weight do the work. After 3 clumsy blows, the rhythm came. Wood split clean under the blade, and each crack felt like something inside her breaking free. "You don't shy from work," Eli said quietly. "Whoever called you useless was blind." She swallowed hard. "My stepfather said men wanted soft women," she muttered. "Not one built like a plow horse. Men who never built anything on their own want ornaments," he replied. "Out here ornaments die quick. Out here a woman's back and hands are worth more than lace." Days settled into a pattern. They raised walls log by log until the cabin stood shoulder high, then taller than Eli himself. She learned to notch corners to mix mud for chinking, to hang pots from iron hooks. He forged over the fire. In the evenings, she cooked beans and bannock, while he mended tack or whittled small shapes out of scrap wood animals rough but sturdy, that he left on the shelf like practice, or maybe like company. One night, as wind rattled the canvas roof, she found courage to ask the question that had hung between them since town. "Why did you take me?" she said softly. Really? Not just because you dislike Mr. Pike? Eli sat a long time staring into the coals before he spoke. My ma had broad shoulders just like yours, he said. Folks called her plain until she hauled 3 children and a broken-backed husband through 2 winters. After she died, people said, "They do not make women like that anymore." His hand closed around the little wooden horse he had carved. When I saw you standing there straight as a pine while they sold you like a chair, I thought maybe they do. Maybe they made one more. Hannah looked down at her own scarred hands, at the muscles in her forearms. For the first time in 21 years, she wondered if the heaviness in her body might not be shame at all, but strength waiting to be used. The first snow came early that year, a thin white sheet laid over the ridge, while the creek still ran bright and fast. By then the cabin had real walls and a tight roof, and a door that shut with a solid sound that made Hannah feel safer than any locked trunk in town ever had. She and Eli moved through their days with a quiet rhythm that felt almost like they had practiced it for years instead of weeks. In the mornings, she baked coarse bread in a blackened Dutch oven, while he checked the stock and the snares. At midday, they worked side by side, cutting more wood, hauling stone, shaping a proper hearth. At night they sat by the fire, their shoulders almost touching, while wind leaned against the logs, and the world outside turned to darkness and pine shadow. No promises had been spoken, but something steady had grown between them all the same. It showed in the way Eli always poured her coffee first, and in the way Hannah always set aside the crispiest piece of bacon for him without thinking. It showed in the way their silences had changed from wary to easy. One late afternoon, the sky went low and gray, and the air held that metallic taste that comes before a storm. Hannah was splitting kindling near the porch when the sound of hooves climbed up the ridge, violent and careless, not like Eli's steady trail pace. The axe paused halfway. Through a log, and something in her tightened. 2 riders broke from the trees in a spray of snow and dead needles. One was a thin man with a sheriff's badge that caught what little light there was. The other she knew even before she could see his face. The slouch in the saddle, the hard set of his shoulders, the mean way he held his reins. Abel. Hannah's hands went slick on the axe handle. Eli stepped out of the barn, wiping his palms on a rag, his body slotting instinctively between her and the riders. He did not reach for the rifle leaning by the door, but the way he stood said he could claim it in one breath if he had to. "You have business up here, Sheriff?" he asked, his voice flat and calm. The badge man cleared his throat. "We got word a woman was taken from town under unclear circumstances. Margaret Calloway claims her stepdaughter was lured away by a mountain man with no lawful intentions. I am here to see if there is truth in it." Abel swung down from the saddle and spat into the snow. "Truth is that girl belongs to us," he snarled. "She ran off instead of doing her duty, and I want what is owed. Either she comes back, or you pay what that brothel keeper would have paid me." Hannah felt heat burn under the cold air, the old urge to shrink back rising like a reflex, and meeting something new she had grown up here on the ridge. Eli did not look at Abel first. He turned his head toward her instead, his expression asking a question in front of both men, as plain as if he had spoken it aloud. "Is this man your guardian, Hannah? Do you want to leave with him?" The use of her name in the open air steadied her. She set the axe down slowly and stepped up so she stood level with Eli's shoulder, her skirt brushing his coat. "He is my stepfather," she said, and her voice did not shake. But I am 21, and I am not a cow on a bill of sale. I chose to ride away. I choose to stay." The sheriff shifted uneasy in his saddle. "Miss, if he sold you against your will, there might be a crime here. But if you went free and clear, that is different. I need it said plain." Hannah looked straight at Abel and watched his mouth twist. "You heard her," Eli said quietly. "She chose." Abel's face flushed dark. "She owes us years of work," he barked. "Food, clothes, a roof. You think you can just walk in and take what's mine?" Hannah's laugh came out short and sharp. "What you had," she said, "was my fear. You do not own that anymore. You never owned me." For a moment the only sound was the creak under its skin of ice and the wind moving in the tops of the spruce. The sheriff let out a slow breath that clouded the air. "Far as the law sees it," he said at last, "a grown woman who chooses her own roof is no one's property. If she wants to stay here, there is nothing I can do about it." Abel swung toward him, but the sheriff only lifted one hand. "You pushed your luck selling her to Pike," he added. "Man like that could have landed you on the wrong side of my office. I would ride back quiet and grateful if I were you." Abel's gaze snapped back to Hannah. "You'll regret this, girl," he hissed. "That big ox will tire of your mule face soon enough. When he does, you will crawl home, and I will make sure every mile hurts." Something moved in Eli, then not quick and hot, but slow and rooted. He took one step forward, just enough that his shadow fell across Abel. "You have had your say," he murmured. "Now hear mine. Hannah will never crawl anywhere for me. If she ever leaves this place, she leaves walking upright with her head high with whatever I can pack on a wagon for her. You come up this ridge again to lay hands on her, and you will not be leaving at all." He did not raise his voice. He did not touch the rifle. But the trees themselves seemed to lean closer to listen. Abel must have heard it too, because his mouth worked around another threat that never came. He hauled himself back into the saddle and jerked the reins so hard his horse skittered. "This ain't done," he muttered, and then the two men were gone, their hooves pounding down the trail until the sound faded into the storm wind. Hannah stood very still until the last echo died. Then all at once her knees went weak. Eli turned toward her, but did not reach out. "You all right?" he asked gently. She let out a breath that felt like it had been held for 21 years. "I am not sure yet," she admitted. "But I know this. I did not let someone else speak for me today." A slow smile crept across his face. "No," he said. "You surely did not." That night the storm came in earnest snow slanting against the cabin until the world beyond the windows vanished. Inside the logs held tight, and the fire burned strong, and Hannah lay in her narrow bed, listening to the wind and the quiet sound of Eli moving about in the next room. She thought of Abel's rage, and the sheriff's badge, and the way Eli had looked only at her when it mattered. Somewhere deep in her chest, a new feeling took root. It was not just gratitude, and not just safety. It was the beginning of the wild idea that maybe this place and this man were not merely a refuge from the past, but the first lines of a life she could claim as fully her own. Winter settled in like a great white animal on the ridge. Snow stacked high along the fence rails, and the creek froze in shining bands of ice. Life shrank down to the circle of the fire, the walls of the cabin, and the sound of the wind trying and failing to get in. Weeks passed after Abel's visit, and no one else rode up the trail. The only tracks in the snow belonged to deer rabbits, and Eli's long stride, as he checked the traps, and brought in meat. Hannah felt the tight knot inside her begin to loosen. At first it was just that she could go 2 days without jumping at every hoofbeat in the distance. Then it was the way she started humming over the bread dough without noticing. One morning in late January, Hannah stood at the table rolling biscuit dough and paused. A strange wave swept through her, not like fear, not like sickness exactly, just a deep tired that reached down into her bones. She gripped the table edge until it passed. Eli watched her from the stove, where he was turning bacon in the pan. "You have been pale all week," he said. "Sit a spell and let me finish that." "I am fine," she answered, but even to her own ears it sounded thin. Besides, there is always work. He wiped his hands and came to stand in front of her, his big frame blocking the light from the window. "Hannah, look at me a moment. Has your monthlies come lately?" She blinked, and the room seemed to tilt. By the time the midwife from the valley rode up through the slush a few days later, Hannah already suspected. The woman was small and wiry, her gray hair braided tight under a wool shawl, her hands warm and sure. She listened, pressed here and there, and then gave a slow smile. "Well now," she said, "looks like you brought me up this mountain for something worth the climb. You are carrying." Hannah's heart stumbled. "One baby." The midwife's smile deepened. "Darlin', that is no ordinary fluttering in there. I would wager you are carrying 2. Twins." The word rang in Hannah's chest like a church bell. Her first thought was not joy. It was her mother's voice, sharp as a knife. "Your hips are wrong. Your body is wrong. You will never bear well." She sat down hard on the edge of the bed. Eli knelt beside her, his huge hand covering hers. "If it is 2 or 10, he said quietly, "we will face it. You hear me. You are not doing this alone." The months that followed were the hardest and gentlest of Hannah's life all at once. Her belly grew faster than she thought possible. Her back ached when she hauled water. Her legs trembled when she chopped wood, until Eli took the axe from her hands and would not give it back. "My ridge, my chores," he told her with a crooked grin. "Your job is to keep those little ones growing straight." He built her a wide bed with a strong headboard and stuffed a mattress thick with clean straw and pine needles. He made a rocking chair for the corner of the cabin, smoothing the arms until they shone. At night, when her feet swelled, he lifted them into his lap and rubbed them with bear fat and warm cloths, talking to the curve of her belly, as if the babies could already hear. "You two listen close," he would murmur. "Your ma is the bravest thing on this mountain. You will treat her right when you get here." Spring came late that year, muddy and cold. When the pains started, it was just before dawn, with rain ticking on the roof like fingers. The midwife rode up again with 2 valley women behind her, their skirts already splashed with mud. What followed blurred into one long storm. Hours of pain and sweat saw, and Hannah gripping Eli's hand so hard, he thought his fingers might crack. She cursed. She prayed. She said she could not do it and then did it anyway. At last a thin wail cut through the cabin air. The midwife lifted a red, squalling baby for Hannah to see. "A boy, strong lungs," she declared. Barely time to settle him on Hannah's chest before another wave crashed through her and another long hour came and went. The second baby arrived just as thunder rolled down the ridge, a dark-haired girl who came into the world with a fierce, angry cry that made the midwife laugh out loud. "Well now," she said, patting the tiny back, "there is your twin flame." Hannah lay back, shaking tears running into her hair, while two small, warm bodies heaved and wailed against her skin. Twins, a son and a daughter. Useless she had been called all her life. A waste of bread, a bad investment. Now two new hearts beat under her hands. Eli stood over them, his broad shoulders shaking his beard, wet with tears he did not bother to wipe. "They are perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect." They named the boy Jonah for the prophet who tried to run from his calling and found his way back. They named the girl Mercy because that is what this felt like, something given they had not even known how to ask for. Years later, the cabin would be bigger, with an extra room tacked on, and a small lean-to school Hannah kept for valley children who could ride up the trail. Jonah would learn his letters at the same table where his mother once kneaded dough. Mercy would run wild through the pines with her father's stride and her mother's stubborn chin. Folks in town would say the twins were the strongest children on the ridge, and that their mother could stare down a magistrate if she had to. As for Abel, word drifted up now and then. A deal gone bad, a claim lost a man who spent more evenings at the saloon rail than at any table with family. Hannah never rode down to see for herself. She had a ridge of her own, a man who listened when she spoke, and two children who clung to her skirts like she was the sun. On quiet evenings when the twins were finally asleep and the last coals glowed low, Hannah and Eli sat on the porch, shoulder to shoulder, watching the sky go from gold to purple to black. "Do you ever wish you had chosen town and comfort instead of a stubborn woman with a past?" he asked her once. She looked at him, at his big, rough hands, at the soft way he watched the doorway where their babies slept. "Not for a breath," she said. "This is the first place I was ever chosen, and the first place I chose back. My dear friend, if you are still with me at the end of this story, maybe some part of Hannah's courage settled in your own heart tonight. If it did do me a kindness, hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which moment spoke to you most. Your presence here keeps these mountain tales alive, and I am grateful for you every single time you press play.